Welcome to Off the Grid with Becket Adams, and I'm Matt Hockman. We have a special guest. We've decided we're not going to do the phone calls tonight because we wanted to bring on. We have so much to talk about. We wanted to bring on our first guest is a very, very angry rhino. He's also a photographer. Worked with the Republican Party a lot. Really great guy. Really knowledgeable on politics, and he's a phenomenal photographer. Thanks for coming on, Jason. Hey,
my pleasure to be with you guys.
Well, Beckett's phoning it in tonight because he's stuck at the office because he got stood up by some farmer out in Nevada.
No, not it was the feds. The feds were supposed to have a call with me.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it was the Bureau of Land Management and the National Park Service people.
Oh, who would have thought that the government wouldn't be efficient? Jeez.
I know, right? Anyhow, but that's okay.
I was going to say,
I'm really shocked. I'm really shocked that they didn't show up for their conference call.
Well, actually, I think it's interesting.
That never happens in an Obama presser. That's for sure.
It's one thing to be late. I think the no-show is actually interesting because last time when I did a call with them, they were on time, but they definitely sounded nervous. I guess because the story's now all over Drudge, so it's obviously grown. And then tonight is just a total no-show without. There's not even so much as a courtesy email or anything. So. This could be an interesting development.
Yeah, it was just raw fear, most likely.
Yeah.
Well, from the crazy hordes, as they say. But
they probably just saw, it's a dude from the Blaze. He's going to ask a lot of questions that aren't fun. Let's just pretend like we forgot about it.
They were very good when I did the first call with them. I actually asked them because the family has talked about it. I'm sorry because I'm kind of hijacking the show at this moment. But when I did the first call with them, I had spoken to the rancher's family before, and the rancher's family has made a lot of very serious allegations about military-grade equipment, snipers, military vehicles. So, obviously these are unconfirmed claims. There are no secondary sources on the ground to confirm that. So I try to confirm that from the BLM and the NPS, and I don't think they like those questions. But they answered them very diplomatically. Which is to say they didn't.
Someone probably just forgot.
Well, they gave a non-denial denial. They said, we have security people in place to make sure that everything is very safe. And that's what they said.
Yeah. Well, I guess we were going to start it off, if you want to start off, because I know that you, I saw that you had written a piece, or you were plugging a piece on the Blaze about what happened today with the emails. The fake scandal that is the IRS, that somehow, if it's a fake scandal, it just becomes more and more real every day. But I guess that makes it more fake. If you want to ask the first question, Jason, about the situation with Lerner and Cummings and those emails.
Exactly. Well, we can start off with, actually, there were two big developments on the IRS front today, Mr. Whitman. The first is that the House has now referred Lois Lerner, obviously the embattled IRS official. They've referred her to the DOJ for further investigation with very specific charges against her that are all criminal. Her sharing personal tax information, what's the word I'm looking for? Getting in the way of the investigation. So very specific charges leveled against her. Let's start with that first. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think Eric Holder received the letter and just laughed it off? Do you think this will go anywhere?
Well, the problem is, first of all, yes, those are incredibly serious accusations. And I would normally, even in a Democratic administration, assume that the DOJ would probably follow up and do a serious investigation into this matter. But Eric Holder and his Department of Justice has been so horrendous in terms of accountability, I have no hope whatsoever that will go anywhere.
Nothing. Like I was saying, there's three specific charges. You don't think that'll go anywhere?
I really don't. If you look at their pattern of history over the last 5 years, in terms of all the various scandals that have erupted in this administration, how many of them have actually resulted in any level of accountability at all?
Or any other?
Unless by accountability you mean getting promoted or shifted to a different office.
Yeah.
Or if you're Lois Lerner getting 5 months of paid vacations.
Right.
For real,
exactly.
I want to start targeting people under the name of government. Maybe they'll give me a vacation.
I constantly joke with my coworkers that it looks like the money and the jobs are way better on the left side of things. I might flip eventually. I'll be like, Jumping Jim Jeffords. Remember that guy?
There's one problem is when you do go to the left, you lose all your principles and morals. So sacrifice.
But how does it pay? Right. How does it pay?
And that's also making the assumption, which I think is an assumption an awful lot of Democrats are making, which is that they will be in power forever.
Oh yeah.
That the Republican Party is dead, and that there will be one party rule essentially in this country forever. That's what they're acting like right now. Because I tweeted this earlier. I mean, every American should be concerned about what's happening with the IRS right now. Sure, they were targeting conservative groups, and liberals seem to be overjoyed by this. However, regardless of your ideology, shouldn't you be concerned when the government is being used as a tool against you?
Yeah, that's a good point. Harry said something similar to that, too. He had said, I had retweeted an old tweet from Media Matters that says, the IRS targeted progressive groups, too. Like, well, that's just as bad. Like, why are they targeting anybody?
That's not. But this goes beyond that. This goes to either what Mr. Whitman's saying there is that the president you're setting, how does this not make you uncomfortable? You either have the Senate Majority Leader leading a personal crusade against two private individuals. How does that not make well-meaning progressives uncomfortable? And the other is the president's unilateral tweaking of a law that's been ruled constitutional as a text by the Supreme Court, which would be, of course, Obamacare. Where are the principled progressives or leftists on any of this? Do they not realize that if you are out of power, you just set the precedent for the right wing to start doing stuff like that? Jason, do you think the right wing will, the bad ones, if they get into power, do you think they'll start taking advantage of that, or people might wake up, or is this just strictly red team versus blue team at this point?
Well, look, I don't think that when the GOP regains the reins of power, and we will, that we're going to take advantage of those things. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think the point is that I don't want it to happen, okay? I don't want it to happen under a GOP administration, and I don't want it to happen under a Democratic administration. We should be able to be in a position where, regardless of the ideology of the administration in power, we don't have to worry about being targeted by the government for our political beliefs.
As well it should be. But what I am just having a difficult time understanding is that people who fiercely support, say, the attacks on the Kochs or the Obama administration unilaterally changing Obamacare, why has there not been any outcry? Is it just strictly blue team, red team over there? I think that I really do think that's the issue. I can't really find any principled opposition. It all seems like it'll just flow with who's ever in the White House.
Well, I really do believe that for them it is all about, their team versus evil conservatives. I really believe that. Yeah. Because based on the results of my tweets got a lot of play today, my IRS tweets. And so, of course, I got lots of crazy liberal trolls. And, they have no concern whatsoever about these things happening. They're overjoyed about it by and large, I think. They try and make equivalencies and say, this has happened in previous administrations and stuff. Well, not at this level, it hasn't, okay? No, it hasn't. Does it happen sometimes? Of course, no administration is perfect. But to assume that it's happened at this level, no, it has not. And so I get the feeling that they're just interested in retribution, and I think this flows from the top, frankly. I think Obama has proven that his greatest enemy in this world is the GOP, okay? He wants to destroy and kill the GOP, and frankly, I think, oppositional political thought. And I think that mentality just sort of has pervaded the entire Democratic Party. That's my perception.
I think that would be accurate. I was actually having a discussion last night with my brother, who's in town, oddly enough. But we were discussing politics, as I wanted to do, and the idea of a blue dog Democrat, and we started laughing because I can't think of any. That's dying breed. Are there any left?
Joe Manchin?
Well, there was Joe Lieberman, right? But what happened to him?
Oh, he's gone. Manchin may be the closest thing.
Well, Manchin perhaps. Lieberman, he got crucified.
Yeah, he's gone.
Yeah, he got run out of the party.
John McCain?
Well, and another example is Pat Caddell, who's always on Fox News. Yeah. He's a Democratic strategist, but he's a brilliant guy.
He keeps it real.
He is, you watch the left attack him even when he goes on Fox News and does anything that even remotely resembles dissent from the party line. It's pretty staggering. I think it says a lot.
Yeah, we haven't. It seems like they always constantly, the left is always constantly Obama saying like the radical right, the right wing crazies, and blah blah blah. But as much as we've gone as a party a little bit closer to the right, they've gone to the left way faster and way farther. They've gone way out there to the left. I mean, they talk about we need compromise, but how many bills are sitting on Harry Reid's desk that he keeps blocked? I mean,
I think there's about 50 now.
The president sent a budget down to the House, and the only people that voted for it were Moran and Capter. And those two people are idiots.
Yeah, Moran's the one who said Congress isn't getting paid enough at $174,000 a year.
Okay. He's also the one whose son beats up women. But yeah, it's staggering. It's insane to think about. Like, these people talk about we're crazy and moving to the right. But to be honest with you, I see that the party, we move more fiscally conservative, and it seems like, but socially conservative, we're kind of drifting a little bit more libertarian where we don't care. We don't care about that stuff. Maybe it's just me. You've been in politics. Are they moving farther to the left at a quicker rate than we are moving to the right?
Oh, no question about it. I mean, the loonies have completely taken over the Democratic Party. Becket brought up an interesting point with Harry Reid attacking private citizens constantly, daily, from the Senate floor. It's outrageous,
Yeah,
and the whole party just strikes me that way. I've been working in politics for a long time. As you guys know, I worked with Romney's digital team and stuff. So, I mean, I've kind of been exposed to a lot of different stuff over the years politically. And, the amount of crazy on the far left that is they've really hijacked the Democratic Party, the far left has. It's undeniable.
And I think one of the admirable things about Matt was saying things have moved a little more to the center for the right, and I think he's accurate when he says social issues seem to have not taken a back seat, but are not as pressing to many people on the right. One of the things I think is admirable about the right that you don't see on the left is accountability. When somebody really messes up, the right is more than willing to call them out on it. And for instance, I can't remember the name of it. It's the Louisiana congressman, the smooching congressman. Guy who cheated on his wife.
I think.
Vance.
I think rightfully so. A lot of people were saying, mess around, but you mess around with married women and you're married. Come on, man, you got step down. Maybe it was some. Whereas we see someone like, Leland Yee, who was trying to sell guns to the triad, and not a peep from the left, not a peep from the Democrats.
He still hasn't stepped down either, has he?
No, he's still
It's really weird. Democrats, as a general rule, they circle the wagons, man. When somebody's in trouble, I mean, they defend those people. I've always said, or at least in recent years, I've said, that being in trouble with the law or whatever is kind of an enhancement for a Democrat, a resume enhancement. I think it really is,
Yeah, it took him a while. I mean, Bob Filner he was in office for a while, and then he went to some rehab, and then he came back. It's just blows my mind. I'm like, if a Republican did that, they'd have to be gone right now. And to be honest with you, Beckett's right. We call out people, even if it's something stupid on Twitter. Look at what we did with that moron. We're not even going to say his name. The moron who had something stupid to say. Everybody jumped on him. Now, if somebody on the left said that, the guy on the left would have deleted the tweet, and everyone would pretend like nothing ever happened.
I think actually one of the best examples of this happening is sort of if somebody on, it's not a red team, blue team thing. If somebody who is a Republican says something stupid, Republicans or people who are conservative are more than willing to say, you're a moron. A great example of this it was one Sunday morning. I had to work. I was filling in for someone at the Blaze. And one of my coworkers, who is actually pro-choice, sent me a story that was breaking about a gentleman named Todd Aiken talking about legitimate rape. And she said, she called me and she said, you're pro-life, right? I'm like, yes, ma'am. what the hell is this? And I watched, I have no idea what he's talking about. And then, of course, it happened, the criticism. And the greatest thing about that example is that I don't recall, save for a handful of very few people, most of the people on the right were more than willing to say, you're an idiot. What the hell? You should step out of this race right now. However, we go back to Filner. Filner was doing this stuff for years, and people were covering it up. It wasn't just politicians. It was the media was complicit in covering this stuff up. I mean, the sad thing is when you take a step back and realize that people win elections. I mean, what the hell? What exactly is the right doing wrong to lose to people like this? Totally loaded question.
Well, I think that's a legitimate question, right? I mean, I've worked in a lot of campaigns. That's a legitimate question. How do we lose to these people?
Because we're dorks.
Well,
it's
no,
true.
because I was, to be honest.
I think it says, this is going to be a terrible thing to say, but I think it says a lot about the electorate, too.
Oh, it definitely does. There's no doubt.
Remember Charlie Rangel? I mean, the guy's under, he's got all kinds of ethics investigations and stuff ongoing. He's running for Congress, and he still gets elected. That has to reflect on the electorate at some point.
The thing is the problem is the electorate. It's become really a show. I mean, if you think about it, and that's why I was discussing with somebody earlier about it. We need to. The problem is, and I've said this a million times, we have the better message than the left. There's no question about it. It's just recently, over the last couple of years, except for little small bursts in state elections and Congress in like 2010, we don't have the best messengers. Obama's message is terrible, and now he's phoning it in, but he could deliver a message, and they had people that could deliver the message. Bill Clinton could deliver a message great. George Bush could deliver a message, but he wasn't like magnificent about it. Fantastic. It's why if you notice, they're starting to push more guys like the Rand Pauls, the Ted Cruz, the Marco Rubios, the guys who are very smooth in the way they talk, the way that they, very personable, cool. I mean, like you would want to hang out with those guys. I bet Mitt Romney's awesome, and I saw the election, but I don't know if I'd want to hang out with Mitt Romney because it just feels like it'd be awkward silence 90% of the time.
Well, a lot of people felt that way, obviously. That's why they didn't vote for him, even though they felt he was a better candidate, And so that personal connection thing is really, really important, and we've been pretty bad at it as a party. Part of the problem is, I think, that, we have, like you said, we have a really, really good message. But we also have a pretty significant portion of our party who is, I would say, they're definitely more against a lot of things than they are for things. And people don't vote for people who are against things as a general rule. That's not always true. But as a general rule, people want you to be for something. That was one of the things, I've read pretty much every book there is about Reagan. I was actually alive when Reagan was president. That's how old I am. Reagan, I remember this about him, even though I was just a little kid, is I remember he was very optimistic. And he made people feel good about being Americans. He made people feel good about their country and feel good about, the things that were going on. And he made people feel good about his propositions and his policies. And that's really what we need. I think of Arthur Brooks, AEI, for instance. That guy knows how to sell our message in terms of capitalism, right? There isn't anybody that knows how to sell it better than he does. Well, we need to be better at a party at selling our ideas on those things, on those issues that we own, that we're good at, that clearly through history have been their demonstrably better policies. We need to be a lot better at selling those things, and we need to be a lot less caustic to people who are good at selling those things. We have a lot of people who, on our side, who I consider really good, intelligent people, who really seem to be antithetical to actually, people who are trying to present a positive message. For instance, me personally, I get accused of being a rhino a lot for this, but I'm less concerned about cutting spending than I am about economic opportunity, okay? So I think our message needs to be one, not so much of cutting spending, and not to say that we're not interested in it, but it needs to be, how do we increase opportunities for people? Because if we do that, we're going to close that budget gap through increased treasury revenues, because we're creating jobs and we're creating opportunities for people, and we need to have a business environment that's conducive to that. Well, if we have people that are trying to sell that message, I find a lot of times those people get virtually crucified. That's a problem.
Yeah, it definitely is. Becket, we're going to just kind of real quick jump on, switch gears real quick with I guess we got about 7 or 8 minutes left to go in this segment, and definitely wanted to get Jason's opinions on the Obamacare, or the Obamacare with everything that's going on with that, and also the equal. We were going to talk about the Equal Pay Act and whatnot.
Okay, well, I mean, if we could just jump off from that, is obviously this is the new talking point from the Obama administration, all this stuff about equal pay for women and raising the minimum wage. We can package these two together. Is this, shooting this question to Whitman, is this the new populist message? I mean, obviously this won't go anywhere in the Senate. What the hell is the point of all this? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, this is clearly nothing but an attempt by the administration to deflect from all the other problems that they have right in front of the midterm elections. I mean, that's what this is, And the talking point that they've been putting out there about the 77 cents to every dollar, that has been thoroughly debunked. It's been thoroughly debunked, and they continue to persist in it because they know that their voters will by and large buy it, and they're hoping to make gains in the midterm elections using this policy. I mean, there's really no other explanation for it. And I think, this is actually, I was watching like the NRSC and other Republican groups, the RNC and also the NRCC. I think that they handled this from a messaging standpoint really, really well. Really well. In terms of saying, Republicans are for equal pay, okay? We're not against equal pay for women, and to say that is ludicrous, number one. And number two, there's a large number of Democratic lawmakers who pay their female staffers dramatically less than their male staffers. So, there's a certain level of hypocrisy as well, and I think that we did a really good job of pointing those things out.
Like, for instance, yesterday...
Now, how effective that will be, I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I think it may pick up some steam. I mean, I just know the optics of yesterday when they had the Democratic governors at the White House to talk about all this. And there was one female governor among all of them, whereas the Republicans actually have not plurality, but a majority of them are women governors. Some of them are quite successful. So I think, I would agree with that. I think the messaging is working, so my take on this, and I would like to see if you agree, is that the White House has zero plans of actually advancing this anywhere. This is purely to just distract before the midterms. I mean, this is essentially just trying to cut off the bleeding for long enough until they can get to the hospital.
It's pretty much what it is. It's a rescue mission for them. That's all it is. I mean, if they really cared about it, they would have fixed the problem with the White House pay gap, right? That's been well known for 2 years now.
Awkward.
So I mean, if they were really serious about this, they'd address it in their own party before they, start attacking the GOP for being anti-women and against this equal pay, stuff. It's just a big shenanigans, all it is.
Well, the funny thing about it is, that's great. I'm all for equal pay. But there's this thing that happened in 1964 that made sure that was going to be in place. We already have laws for this. And then the Lilly Ledbetter Act, I mean, I don't understand. It's like if Obama came out and he comes out and says, I'm going to make an executive order making sure that you have the right to free speech. Thanks, bro. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
What's
Thanks for confirming that.
What's even weird about this is that didn't they already sign the Lilly Ledbetter Act?
Yes, they did.
So what?
Is it not working?
I guess not.
It's not working in the White House, that's for sure.
Well, let's just put it this way. Well, look, if it is just a sideshow, I guess the light at the end of this tunnel is that we know that it'll be over by the time the midterms are done, and we don't have to put up with this silly BS anymore.
Well, the thing is, they only have a certain number of things that they attack, and they do it kind of consistently. For instance, they tweeted today about Paul Ryan's budget being tax cuts for the rich. Well, I mean, come on,
but that's just part and parcel of the Koch derangement syndrome, which really is taken on.
They've been using that talking point since Woodrow Wilson. I'm not even kidding. I literally can pull lines from Woodrow Wilson's speech talking about the Republicans just want to cater to the rich. I mean, read a Woodrow Wilson speech and read a Barack Obama speech. The only thing missing are the ums and uhs and the let me be clear.
Right? They haven't. Their playbook has literally not changed in a century.
No,
and yet they still win elections.
And they base their entire belief on abortion back to 1974. So their science, the party of science, wants to keep talking about, well, back in 1974, we've had quite the amount of medical changes since 1974. So who's really living in the past?
Well,
this is a sensitive topic for me, by the way, because I am actually a scientist. I have a doctoral degree in biological science. So I'm always amused when I'm accused of being anti-science. No, I just am not interested in shoehorning science to fit whatever my ideological agenda is. Okay?
Yeah.
That
exactly.
Which is what they do. That's what they do. And I'm always amused when they say, well, you're anti-science. Well, no. I actually believe in the scientific method. I believe in applying science to problems and looking for accurate statistics that will uphold that hypothesis, not shoehorning statistics, to fit whatever the ideological agenda is you have for your science. Very different philosophy.
Exactly. Well, we're running into to our break at midway, and we really appreciate you coming on. I know you came on short notice, Jason. Can you let everybody know where they can reach you at, see some of your photography and whatnot?
What's that? I didn't hear you.
I said we're going to go ahead and run. Can you let people know where they can reach you at and check out your photography and your website and whatnot?
Well, I'm at Jason B. Whitman on Twitter, and, of course, all of my information is there in my profile, as you alluded to earlier.
Yeah, it sounds good, and we thank you very much for coming on. Very knowledgeable on politics and the Republican Party.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All right,
thank you.
We're gonna go to the break, and on the other side of the break, we have J.R. Salzman coming up, and we're going to talk to him. Really happy to have him come on the show, and we're going to discuss a lot of things. Discuss the Fort Hood shooting and maybe some other topics. So see you on the other side of the break.
Thank you for shopping Amazon.com. When you do, that makes you a sponsor of the 405 Media. Click on the Amazon banner on top of our homepage. Then shop. Simple. It costs you nothing. When you think Amazon, click one more time on the 405media.com, then on the Amazon banner. Thank you. The Wrap.
The best part is this guy's a gun control advocate who's been trading rocket launchers and weaponry with people as far-flung as the Philippines, Russia, and the Ukraine.
The Wrap with Amy Otto and Bruce Carroll.
David Ferdoso joins us.
Lots of scandal going on here. This feels a lot like 2006 right now. That you had Republicans getting into trouble all over the place.
One, is this new delay? One, surprising? Probably not. But two, to paraphrase Hillary, what difference at this point does it make anyway?
They're starting to realize how much damage this law is actually going to do and how much it's going to affect immediately upcoming elections.
There was a piece in the New York Times today where an author details like the numerous failings with his Affordable Care Act, and he starts longing for the health care that his dog has.
Wednesdays, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific on the 405media.com.
Thank you so much for protecting our kids from guns.
You're on the 405. Off the Grid.
And he's also the only person I've ever seen that could write, "My dog just rolled over" on Facebook and get like 62 likes.
I'm also, just a correction, I'm the best looking person in social media too.
Off the Grid with Matt Hockman and Becket Adams.
You have men in the United States Army running for cover and hoping the police show up.
The base is a soft target that's filled with brave Americans, but they got their hands tied.
I'm sure the jihadists completely consider it a soft target. It's like a shopping mall, or like you said, a school. It's probably worse than a shopping mall, because at least here in Arizona, you're allowed to carry.
In several of these shootings, Jared Lautner in Arizona, the Sandy Hook shooting, a number of these shootings always involved somebody who was desperately unhealthy in the head, but for some reason the argument always turns into, get away from my gun. What can we do to maybe help people like this?
Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific, only on the 405media.com. You're on the
405.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction.
The Friddle Show.
Gay marriage is not even legal in Arizona, so how is this cake discussion even relevant?
The Friddle Show with Crystal Heath.
I mean, this bill, I read it today. You can read it. It's 2 pages long.
The Friddle Show, live Monday nights, 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific.
It's become acceptable to sleep around. Did you know that only 3% of Americans abstain from sex until they're married?
The Friddle Show, family-friendly, politically incorrect news commentary from a young Christian conservative perspective.
And if my disagreeing with a lifestyle due to my religious beliefs is now the same as hatred, then I apparently hate 97% of Americans.
Live original talk only on the 405media.com.
The president, he wasn't too far off base when he said that we're no longer a Christian nation because, quite frankly, we're not. The general populace does not have a biblical worldview.
You're on the 405.
We are a bold and active voice for the unborn. We are Audio Girl Ministries, saving the lives of babies by helping moms in crisis pregnancies get past the crisis. How? Free ultrasound imaging so the woman can see the life she's carrying, and by supplying her with essential baby items, diapers, clothes, food, crib, car seat, all given with a loving and caring heart. Want to help? Log on to AudioGirlMinistries.com and make a tax-deductible donation. AudioGirlMinistries.com. Thanks.
This is Katie Pavlich. You're listening to the 405 Radio.
Welcome back to Off the Grid with Becket Adams, and I'm Matt Hockman. And now joining us, the second half of the show, is J.R. Salzman, who is an Iraqi war vet, part of Wounded Warriors, and I've been following him for a while now on Twitter, and he's at J.R. Salzman, and he's really, really, really knowledgeable. He's always willing to answer questions, and apparently on April 1st he announced that he's having my child. So I guess that was April Fool's, but my wife was not amused that I was having a child with another man. But anyways, welcome on the show, JR.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
I'm going to send it right to Becket because, Becket, we're going to talk about, we obviously had the Fort Hood shooting last week, and it's second time for that community to deal with a shooting like that is just awful. And a lot of people came out with misinformation and whatnot, and I guess you have some questions for JR about how they handled it and the whole situation as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. Again, thanks for coming on, JR. And as Matt mentioned, again, this was a shooting in the same spot and just in one administration. And almost immediately following the shooting, you had people like Cassie Hunt with MSNBC talking about how the shooting reminds us that we need to have a serious debate about PTSD, so on and so forth. But it's from all indications that the individual, the shooter, didn't have PTSD. At the same time, it still did put it into the peripheral, the whole issue going on there. But, if we could take a 5,000-foot view of what happened at Fort Hood, again, this is the second time in 5 years. Is there some sort of, is there a conversation we should be having about stress or there's issues like this? Again, the shooter did not have PTSD, but perhaps this is a good time to maybe start talking about it and addressing it. And obviously you know far more about it than I do, so if I could just toss it over to you like that.
I'd say that there's the conversation you should have is just about mental health in general. Now, granted, he didn't have PTSD or PTS. Some people just say, "Well, I want to call it PTS because of the stigma." Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's PTSD. I have PTSD. I think that it's very unfortunate that obviously you had those two events at Fort Hood, but at the same time. What Nadal Hassan did versus what this, the latest one did, obviously they're two entirely different things. The latest one, he did not have PTS, or he was being screened for PTS. He did not have a Purple Heart. He was not wounded in combat. He served 4 months in Iraq. And it sounds like he had some pre-existing, mental health issues. Now, that in itself shouldn't necessarily be a red flag. Someone's taking antidepressants at some point in their life. Let's face it, we're all human. I think there's a large percentage of Americans or people in general who will take antidepressants at some point in their life. So that's not necessarily a red flag. Perhaps it's just that this man was overcome by grief, or he had something happen in his life where that drove him to do this. Now, I'm not going to sit here and blame the gun. I'm not going to blame the medication. I think both of those have been being flung around. I think it's just, why do people do something like that? Why does someone grab a knife and go stab a bunch of students in high school? Why does someone grab a gun and go shoot up a shopping mall or something like that? People, for whatever reason, people do that. But, as with anything that happens in the military, I think, as I said earlier today, I was on another news show, and in terms of media narratives, when you're talking about veterans, PTSD is to veterans what the AR-15 is to gun owners. It's that instant scapegoat. It's that instant go to, a veteran did it, he must have PTSD, he must have served, he must have done all these other things. Look, I have PTSD. For those who, I guess, maybe don't know what PTSD is, it stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's kind of difficult to put into words, but it's basically like when you're exposed to something or something physically happens to you, that is so traumatic that sort of you're mentally reliving that. You're mentally and emotionally on the defensive for whatever happened against you, from then on. So for me, for instance, I was wounded by an IED. I lost my right arm to an IED in Baghdad. When I woke up, my right arm was gone. When I came to in the Humvee, I literally had 2 bones sticking on my arm. My arm was gone. So my PTSD has basically been, dodging IEDs in my mind. And, when I'd have nightmares, I would have nightmares of improvised explosive devices going off. When I would drive down the road, I would see tires on the side of the road and boxes and debris, and I would think, that might have an IED in it. So what PTSD does, it makes you act defensively to situations that remind you of that which you experienced the trauma. For instance, for like maybe a sexual assault victim, they're obviously going to try and they want to stay away from whatever the circumstances were under which they were assaulted. So, for me, I would dodge things on the road. I would hold my breath driving by tires and stuff on the side of the road, even when I'm in Wisconsin. At no point in time, and I don't know anyone with PTSD, and there are plenty of soldiers I've met and I've interviewed in my line of work, and I've just met as a wounded warrior, and I don't know any who have gone on the offensive because of their PTSD. I don't know if it's a Hollywood mess, it's a media mess, or what it is, but there's sort of this stigma that PTSD means you're crazy, you talk to yourself, and you're, maybe it's the old crazy Vietnam vet that we've seen in how many movies, where they're, yelling incoming in their kitchen and hiding under the kitchen table and doing all this crazy stuff. That's just not the case. And I've met some people who have terrible PTSD to the point that they're going to be medicated for the rest of their life. So, is that the way it is? Well, not in my experience. Like I said, it makes you act defensively. It doesn't make you get a gun and go on the offensive and do something crazy like that. So, frankly, again, I think it's a media narrative, and two, it's one that's just shows a massive ignorance of what PTSD really is.
Now, I wanted to ask you, JR, and we talked about it last week with John Gabriel, and they talk about it. I want to talk about it to somebody who has lived life on the base, who's been a soldier, seen combat. What is your personal opinion when it comes to the firearm situation on bases?
I'm assuming you're talking about like personal firearms. And
yes,
not going to the arms room. In some ways it makes sense, and I think in other ways it's just totally mind blowing. In that, look, when I was in Iraq, I had an up armored Humvee. I was a team leader, fire team leader. So when I rolled on missions, I had a 50 cal machine gun. We each had an M4 or an M16. We had a grenade launcher. We had thousands of rounds of ammo. We each had an M9 pistol. Okay, so I had enough firepower on my Humvee to wipe out a small village. But then suddenly when you get back to a military base, suddenly you can't be trusted with firearms. You can't be trusted with ammo, sort of in your off-duty time. Now, I'm not saying that we should turn around and issue an M9 to every dumb private out there and say, here's 2 magazines full. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that maybe there's a time for a little bit of common sense reform. I think the myth of the gun-free zone. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, so much for the gun-free zone. They got shot up on a military base. Well, the only time you have your weapons out is to do training or to go to the range. Well, guess what? If you draw your weapons from the arms room, you don't get your ammo until you're walking by the ammo shack on your way out to the firing line, and whatever ammo you have when you're done gets handed back. Assuming you're that incompetent that you didn't fire all your rounds on the line, but you hand it all back. You're not given ammo. It's not like the regular civilian world where you can have a gun and an ammo and do whatever you want. It's all strictly controlled. So, like I said, I think there's room for improvement there. Like I said, I'm not saying that we should give every dumb private an M9 and a couple mags full. But what I am saying is I think there's some room for some common sense reform there. Maybe at the very least give the commanders or first sergeants or platoon leaders or something. But honestly, I think this was just a tragic incident. If somebody snapped for whatever reason, something was going on in his head that didn't work. And, like I said, why does anybody do anything? Why does anybody pull a gun on somebody and decide to shoot them and kill them and indiscriminately fire upon innocent people? Well, sometimes people just snap, and that's the unfortunate reality of the world we live in.
And that's actually kind of going back to something I wanted to ask earlier, is that, again, I don't know about the issue as well as you do, but PTSD is, I guess, strictly speaking, isn't exactly new. They used to call it the 1,000-yard stare, did they not? And like you did mention Vietnam, about how that kind of got into Hollywood's, it got into their grill about how, Vietnam veterans would come back and be kind of these psycho weirdos. But in a lot of stuff I've read about, there was there was another element that went into the Vietnam War, where some of the veterans came back a little more disheveled because there was a lot of psychotic drugs that was actually a major issue with the military at the time. My question today is that PTSD is obviously very real and very serious, but is it a new thing? Again, like I was saying, I'm under the impression that they just had different terms for it. How did America and the world at large deal with it back then? And this is why I come back to the media. And again, the media is like, oh well, if this guy who snapped, he must have had PTSD. But I think you'd be hard pressed to find any example back from, say, the post World War I or World War II of a guy snapping because he had shell shock, which would be another term they used at the time. My question to you is actually several at this point. But 1,000-yard stare, shell shock. Are these all sort of the same basic idea, and that it's evolved? Has it gotten worse? Perhaps has the nature of warfare gotten worse, that PTSD is more serious than, say, the sort of stuff that they experienced in previous wars? What are your thoughts on that?
I think they're kind of one and the same. I definitely think that the sort of the perception of what PTSD is has definitely changed, and I think it's changed for the better. If you can kind of go back to General Patton and when he slapped a soldier, in a medical unit or whatever he was in for shell shock. Yeah. It was viewed as a weakness. You're weak. You got all your limbs. What's wrong with you? And I think there are still, unfortunately, those units out there and those soldiers who think that. The reality is, there are, as a senior NCO told me once, he said, you got to be careful about what you put into your mind and what you see, because once it's up there, you can't take it back out. And that's the reality. Is it's sort of like living through a real life nightmare that you keep reliving in your mind. And that's a big part of it, because you can't just erase what you've seen. There are things that are so traumatic that you'll never erase them from your memory. They might get dull. They get dull over the time, but they don't never actually just fully go away. Definitely one perception that I noticed from World War II veterans. My godfather and my grandfather were both World War II veterans. You didn't talk about it when you got home. You left. You left that war over there. You didn't talk about it. You didn't bring it home. But I do know that it came back to haunt some of them. I know one day my godfather, he was, quite old, to the point where right before he went into a nursing home, the UPS guy showed up one day and he actually pulled a gun on the UPS guy. Thought he was a Japanese soldier coming to take his wife. So this is right in Wisconsin. So it goes to show that these are things that were not treated. They were viewed as just being weak. Well, now I think that you've got better diagnosis. You've got access to medication. You've got expanded mental health at the VA. It's not perfect. It's got a long ways to go. And I know something that I've been very critical of is the fact that in a lot of cases, I think the VA throws pills at the situation. You got a mental health issue? Here's your pills. Come see a therapist in 6 months when we can squeeze you in because we're so backed up. And that's something that I've been very critical about. And I actually hit my doctor with that one day. Now, I also have what's called TBI, or traumatic brain injuries, from the bomb that took my arm, also knocked me unconscious and gave me a traumatic brain injury. So I have to go to a polytrauma doctor. It affects my memory and my concentration. And I asked him one day, and I said, what is your feeling on the medication aspect? They're just throwing all these veterans on meds. And he said, look, he said, statistically speaking, there are a number of veterans who have these issues of PTSD or TBI, and by putting them on medication, they will iron out their problems on their own, whether it be through life or through, their own support network or something like that. So it's obviously better than doing nothing. Now, PTSD, there's no or main cure or instruction manual on PTSD that works for everyone. It's not like a broken arm where you can follow sort of a step-by-step procedure. To set a broken arm. PTSD is the brain. It's chemical reactions in the brain. It's things. People experience trauma differently, and they are affected differently by it. So, as far as treatment goes, what medication or what treatment works for me might not work for the other. The rest of the guys in my platoon. We might have a completely different experience and react differently. What I noticed is the younger soldiers had a harder time dealing with it than some of the older soldiers. Now, you don't actually have to have the trauma yourself to experience it either. I know the medic who treated my arm while we were in Baghdad. He literally opened the door of my Humvee. I swung my legs out, held up my blown off right arm, and I said, "Give me a tourniquet." And he took a step back and staggered. And I asked him later, this guy's an EMT. He's an EMT over in Minnesota, and he's seen all kinds of carnage, people bleeding out, bones sticking out of their limbs and stuff like that. I said, "Well, why did this affect you so hard?" And he said, "Well, I just talked to you like an hour and a half earlier at Balad or at Anaconda, and we were standing around talking before we left on the convoy, and an hour and a half later, there you are bleeding out with your arm gone." So, it's all it affects everyone differently, because I think, it can catch you off guard, or, again, for whatever reason, people experience it differently. So you have to have different treatment options. Now, for me, the big thing, and this might sound, I guess, a little goofy, was the outdoor activity of snowboarding. Now, it wasn't so much the snowboarding itself, it was the activity that helped boost my confidence to let me know that my life wasn't over after losing my arm. It took the 3 months after I lost my arm, I was out on the slopes, kind of learned how to snowboard. After that, kind of boosted my confidence a little bit. After that, I stopped having nightmares. Fast forward a year later, I came back. I was already out of Walter Reed. I'd been discharged from the military. I wasn't sleeping. I would stay awake for 2 days at a time until I finally just collapsed from exhaustion, and then I would, sleep 12 hours and I'd go and do it again. So I really wasn't sleeping. So I came back a year later, really got it, really boosted my confidence. And ever since that moment, I've been sleeping. I've had a normal sleep schedule. It kind of got me a little more grounded in reality. Now, it's different for everyone. Some people do art therapy. Some people go fishing. Some people need group therapy. Some people need to be more heavily medicated. There's a whole variety of options. You kind of have to figure out what works. But you also need to want to get better. Now, I also know veterans who seem to, unfortunately, want to wallow in their own self-misery, and they want to experience that pain or have an excuse to get drunk every night, or, whatever. It's the proverbial, lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I wish we could reach those people, especially before they do something stupid, but, unfortunately, that's the reality. We're, especially being predominantly men, sometimes we're stubborn and we don't want to get help. But, and there's also the stigma of it too. I think when the media rushes to a judgment on whenever a veteran does something stupid or tragic and they run to that PTSD narrative, it increases that stigma, and unfortunately it's affecting us in society. I think I sent a few tweets on it, and I said, the media is quick to sit around and blame veterans and PTSD, and then they wonder why the veteran unemployment rate is so high, why there's so many veterans that are out of work and don't have they're homeless and everything else. You continually enforce these stereotypes, and then you wonder why we're affected by it. There have been plenty of surveys done that have found that potential employers have not hired a veteran because they're worried about, PTSD and something that might happen, even though they really shouldn't be, So it's definitely an unfair narrative by the media, and I think it's a lot of ignorance in the public as well. People just need to realize that, look, we're regular functioning members of society. Yes, we're never going to forget about the war and what's happened to us and the trauma that we've experienced, but we need that help, and we need that helping hand to move past it. And, putting us in this neat little box and and trying to sort of categorize and classify us as crazy or anything like that, or that we're broken and we can't be, that we're not functioning members in society. Well, that's not really helping anyone.
No, I was just going to ask you
because you got the last question. Now, and this is what I actually asked John Gabriel last week on it, with the latest Fort Hood shooting, and it's not a silver lining per se, but with all the major shootings we've had, JR, most of the shooters have had serious sort of mental health issues or struggles of that sort. Again, going back to the idea of a silver lining, you think that perhaps what happened at Fort Hood will finally start America talking about these issues, as like you were saying, back in World War II or even before that people wrote it off and there was kind of this misconception. Luckily, we've come a long way since then. People are realizing this is an issue that should be addressed. Do you think that perhaps the Fort Hood shooting will actually open up this debate so when we drop all of the bizarre squabbling about assault-style rifles and all that nonsense that we keep hearing about, and actually start having a debate about mental health issues? Do you think that will happen now, or will there have to be a couple more shootings down the line?
Look, I think in order for us to get there, a lot of us need to start shouting it, and no matter how hard the media or anybody else, for that matter, starts keep shouting about guns and try to blame the gun. Look, I no more blame the gun than I blame the medication for what this guy did, and that's something I want to touch on really quick, because I got hit with a ton of tweets by people saying, "Oh, these meds it's the medications that are making people doing it, and it's the fact that these medications are actually what's making them do all this." And
like that Drudge headline talking about Ambien.
Yeah, let me tell you what. I know plenty of soldiers who are on Ambien. I actually talked to a few people on Twitter. Now, if this guy had gotten up in the middle of the night and raided his fridge and eaten half the food in his fridge and then sleep walked back to his bed, then yes, that would have been accredited to
sounds like me.
I had so many soldiers, online who tell me that, including a commander for a warrior transition unit. Now, for you civilians, that's warrior transition unit is where wounded troops go to either transition back to the military after treatment or to transition out of the military. Is what I went to after I lost my arm. So. Now, I don't blame. So, I think the blame Ambien is it's kind of a cop out. Now, and the other side of things, what do they call them? SSIs or SSRIs, or whatever the heck they are. Those are medications that I've been on. They're medications that I'm on right now at this very moment for my traumatic brain injury. Because of my traumatic brain injury, I now have the concentration level of someone with a severe ADHD. I've been tested. I used to have razor sharp concentration from years of competing in front of thousands of people in lumberjack sports, and now I'm a complete space cadet. And for me to get any work done, to be able to focus, to go on a radio program like this, or to write or do anything, I pretty much have to be medicated now just so I can be semi-normal again. But again, there's those people out there that say, well, there's this very small percentage that might snap, and studies have shown that I think it's like 1 or 2% might be, say, suicidal. Some of these, but again, when you approach it from that angle, it's pretty much a gun control argument directed at medication. So what you're saying is that I need to live a subpar existence with those of us who are helped by these medications. I basically have to be dependent on other people for the rest of my life because you're worried about that 1% that might, have an adverse reaction. I mean, that's the same argument for vaccines. That's the same argument for anything. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're going to use if it saves even one life argument, well, then we've got to get rid of everything. We got to get rid of Tylenol. We got to get rid of Abbott. We got to get rid of guns. We got to get rid of running with scissors. We got to get rid of chocolate. We got, it's everything. So, frankly, I don't think this was a medication issue. I think it's just an issue of this guy had issues. He was ticked off about something. Something set him off. Why does anybody snap? You really don't know. Like I said, I think it's obviously hugely unfortunate. Nobody expected this. I do think there have been one more thing to touch on. I know we're getting close on time here. Yeah. There needs to be more screening for mental health prior to going in the military. Now, there's a study, and I don't have it right in front of me, but there was a study that determined that the up-tempo or the increase in deployments has not been a factor in suicides and stuff. And that was actually cited in the New York Times about a year ago. There was a big study done from 2001 to 2008 that showed that the military suicide rate, much to the chagrin of the media narrative, is actually pretty much the same as the civilian world. Well, one thing that they did notice in a study that actually came out, I think it was in the Army Times or something like that about a month or so ago, they determined that a lot of these folks who had mental health issues that came out later actually had pre-existing mental health issues before they went in the military. So I think there definitely needs to be better screening, especially when you go through MAPS, military entrance processing station. Instead of just sitting a veteran down or potential veteran down in front of a long list of documents they have to sign and threaten them, if they're not honest about their medical records, perhaps there needs to be a little more screening and more rigorous testing instead of a day of just hearing testing and a vision testing. Let's delve in a little bit into the mental health aspect and, try to figure this out accordingly. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be easy, but I think that's definitely something that needs to be touched on because you don't need someone with prior mental health issues going into a situation where it's only going to make them worse and more of a liability than an asset. So.
Definitely. Well, hey, we are cutting short, and we really appreciate. We want to have you back on very, very soon. This has been, I would say, this is the best segment we've had, and we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and answering some of our questions. Can you let people know where they can reach you at and where they can read some of your material?
Definitely. Somebody can always hit me up on Twitter. It's pretty easy to find, JR Salzman, and you can always find me at my website, jrsalzman.com. You can kind of Google my name too. I do a fair bit of writing, freelance writing and stuff. I actually write for a publication called American Warriors, part of the NRA's Life of Duty network. You can find that at nralifeofduty.tv. It's all free. You can check out the issues. Like I said, if you got a question, I'm always here to answer questions and especially address misconceptions. You can just hit me up on Twitter, and I'd be more than happy to help out.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And that's going to wrap it up for us. I think everybody knows where to reach us at. Coming up next is The Wrap with Bruce and Amy, and they actually have a really cool guest. They actually have me on their show, and also John Fleischman of Flash Report in Breitbart, California. So stay tuned to that, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.
But should I be? Is this the fate that half of the world is planned for me? I know I love you, and you love to see it. But what all the water contains a little drop for me. See the sun go down, it's going on down, and the night is deep. Want a little light, but who's gonna save a little light for me? We know the fire waits, unbelievers, all of the sinners the same. Girl, you and I would die, unbelievers bound to the tracks of the train. I'm not excited, but should I be? Is this the fate that half of the world is planned for me? I know I love you, and you love to see it. But what only water contains a little drop for me. not be.